The United Nations Population Fund and UNICEF are both adamant to continue the fight against female genital mutilation, which is practiced in about 30 countries.
In 2012, these UN agencies designated 6 February as the International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation. It's estimated that more than 200 million women and girls today have undergone FGM, which involves altering or injuring female genital organs for cultural or non-medical reasons.
Earlier, I spoke to the United Nations Population Fund Deputy Regional Director, Justine Coulson. Please note that the following story contains graphic details which could possibly upset sensitive viewers and children.
So I think, first of all, what I want to say is it's a harmful practice. It's an unnecessary, harmful practice that really violates the rights of women and girls, and also really violates their right to bodily integrity, bodily autonomy. But when we actually look at the practice, so there's a number of different things that are done under the term of female genital mutilation, or FGM, to say in a quicker way. So we have something called infibulation, which is where all of the external female genitalia, the clitoris, the labia, they're all cut away and the girl's sewn up until the point of marriage. But in other cultures we also see incisions, so small cuts and pricks and rubbing in herbs, a whole series of very harmful practices. And you know, we have seen some progress in terms of reducing the number of cases of FGM across the continent. We've seen particular successes in Kenya and Ethiopia, but we have to recognise that between now and 2030 we project there are 50 million girls in the world who are at risk of experiencing FGM. So it's not for medical reasons.
Yeah, I wanted to get clarity on that one.
There's absolutely no medical control a young girl's body so she doesn't stray until the point of marriage, and only at that point can she initiate sexual relationships. So in many traditional cultures what happens is they say this has to take place, otherwise the girl cannot be married at the point where she's ready for marriage. But you know what we're saying is, particularly in UNFPA, we're saying, look, the girl's born complete. Her body is healthy.
You don't have to take
We don't have to do this. Let's take her right through to womanhood. She can have a healthy marriage, a healthy childbirth. She can go on to be a very active member of her community and be whole and complete and happy. You know, we've just interviewed a woman in Ethiopia called Malika, and it's just heartbreaking. I mean, she's in her late teens, she has her first child, she was circumcised at a very early age. Her first experience of sexual intercourse was painful, it caused infection. Then with childbirth she had fistula obstruction, she's now doubly incontinent, living in permanent pain. And in the video, I mean, she says both that she doesn't want circumcision for her daughter, but she actually also says that, I wish I died, but I actually feel dead already, because to live with this constant pain and uncomfort, it just isn't a life.
So those are the long-term effects. So in this year, we understand that in this year alone, there are about 4.1 million girls around the world who are at risk of undergoing this FGM. These are shocking numbers.
They are shocking numbers, and you know, I think one of the ways that we've changed the way we've worked is, you know, maybe before it was very much outsiders saying that this is a wrong practice, but what we're really seeing more, and the way that we work more as both UNICEF and also with our colleagues at as UNFPA and as at UNICEF, is working much more with the community. So finding those champions that already really understand that this is a harmful and wrong practice, and working with them as champions within the community.
All right. So the theme for this year, unleashing youth power. Why? Because part of what I've read whilst preparing for this interview is that young people aged 15 to 19, where a GFM is prevalent, are less supportive of continuing with this practice. So I suppose it takes us to that particular case study of Malika, as you were saying earlier on.
No, and you know, we obviously know that there's a huge youth population on the continent now. I mean, every country across the continent has a huge youth population, and you know, we're talking about that as a potential for the future of the continent. But I think also that generation, maybe more than any other, has experienced a huge change in modern life. And so it's, you know, the first generation where we've really seen both equal numbers of boys and girls going through primary education, greater number of children being educated generally, more access to healthcare, better access to, you know, information on their phones and through other means. So I think because of that, they're coming out as a much stronger independent voice than ever before, than any future generation, and really standing up for themselves, so standing up to their parents, standing up to community leaders, saying this is not what I want for myself. I think we're also seeing, you know, girls who maybe have children quite early, maybe in their late teens or early 20s, who've gone through the procedure, also standing up and saying, you know, not for my daughters.
So does this perhaps give some sense of hope that the battle against FGM will eventually be won? I mean, if you have young people who are saying, listen, I'm never going to let my child be part of this.
No, completely. And we have to remember it's a social norm. I mean, it's not fixed. There's nothing concrete. There would have been a time, if you go far enough back in a community, when the practice didn't even happen. So, I mean, if we talk to our grandmothers or even great-grandmothers about things that happened in their childhood that they thought would never change, we've already seen huge changes in all types of social norms. So in the same way as, you know, we're seeing these changes happening across communities, we really are committed to seeing zero FGM by 2030, and we really think that's achievable.
But, you know, listening to you explaining to us what this FGM is, it's worrying, more so in light of the high levels of gender-based violence that we see happening.
No, and it's true that, I mean, FGM is just one of the many harmful practices that women experience, and it exists within that, you know, more general high levels of violence that we see against women and girls. I mean, not just in South Africa or Africa, but across the whole world. You know, and this is one of the reasons why we're talking about FGM today, but within a broader context of violence against women and girls, you know, recognising, I think, that civil society here in South Africa has really stepped up to speak out against the completely unacceptable levels of violence we see against women and girls here in this country.
All right, so this particular problem, we were talking about it continental. I just want us to bring it a bit home here to South Africa. How prevalent is it? Do we still have such practices in the country?
You know, I think sometimes what happens across southern African countries is we say that, you know, FGM is something that happens up in the north of Africa. We see high incidences in Somalia or Ethiopia. But the reality is there are still pockets of FGM here in South Africa. I mean, there's one community in the Eastern Cape that still practices female genital mutilation, and there's been some civil society activists that have spoken out very strongly and tried to engage with community leaders to stop that. But, you know, we also have to recognise that we live in a global world, so communities are moving constantly from one country to another. So, you know, we're seeing in South Africa, just as we're seeing in Europe, that communities that are moving in from countries that have very high incidence of FGM, it's either women who've already experienced FGM, so therefore you need health workers and social services that know how to support those women, particularly at points of childbirth, and how to deal with the complications that they face in a non-judgmental and supportive way. And I think also working with community leaders, teachers and others that engage with young girls, recognising they may still be at risk within their community of becoming a victim of FGM, and we really need to be able to protect those girls.